Hello and welcome to a special edition of the Gold and Guest Talk Tottenham podcast. I am not Rob Guest. I am Tom Canton, the football writer at football.london, covering mainly Arsenal, which should give you a bit of an indication about what we're doing today. I'm joined, as always, on the show, though, by Alasdair Gold. How you doing, mate? You good, you well?
I'm good. Hope you are too. Yeah, it's always good to talk ahead one of these games. Get it out of our system before the kind of mayhem and chaos ensues.
Indeed. Of course, if you are listening on an Arsenal perspective, this show is going out on the Arsenal Way side of things as well. So you've got both perspectives in this show, but I'm very much looking forward to it. The Golden Guest Talk Tottenham podcast is, of course, always brought to you by NordVPN. More information about that later. But we're here, of course, today to talk about this derby, which Ali is about injuries more than anything and absences, it seems, because for both sides, there are afflictions that both managers will be dealing with. On the Tottenham side of things, how are things looking?
We're going to find out, essentially, is the answer to that one. There's always some kind of afflictions going on at Tottenham, but yeah, we're waiting to see on Dominic Solanke and Mickey van der Ven, the two main key people that missed the game. Well, Solanke's missed the game against Everton and Newcastle, but he was presumably, it sounded like, close to coming back for Newcastle. And the same goes to Van der Ven, who got injured during the Everton game. So we shall find out about them. Two kind of key components of this Postecoglou system, which will be kind of a massive boost, I think, for Spurs if they can come back into training. But we'll find out at Postecoglou's press conference definitively tomorrow. And there's a couple of other ones knocking about for Spurs. Richarlison, who unfortunately always seems to be an injury doubt in a Tottenham shirt. He's got a muscle injury, which was picked up in training. And there was a little thing on international duty. I know it's relatively little compared to what you're going to tell us about Arsenal, but Yves Bissouma was spotted getting a bit of a trodden on foot, let's put it that way, on duty with Marley and taken off, although some suggestions that maybe he walked off fine. One of those, that's the international break in a nutshell, really, is you get little bits of information that we don't get the full thing until the managers sit down for their press conferences.
Yeah, it is tricky. And of course, on the Arsenal side of things, Mikel Arteta's press conference tomorrow afternoon, early afternoon. So we'll hear more specifics about some of the people who are in contention. But the people that we know are almost certainly going to be out. In the case of Martin Odegaard, is the bigger news. He suffered a quite significant ankle twist in Norway's game against Austria at the early part of the week. He was spotted on crutches getting onto a plane from Norway, and suggestions are that scans are not showing that there's a break, which is good news for Arsenal supporters. Arsenal do, to my understanding, want to do more scans because the swelling can sometimes, hide and mask some of the more in-depth damage that's gone on there. But there is an optimism that it's not too serious, but it's serious enough that it would be an almighty shock for him to rock up in an Arsenal shirt at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium on Sunday. So he is expected to miss that game. The likelihood is also going to miss the Atalanta fixture and the Manchester City fixture as well next week, which is another huge blow. And then, of course, Arsenal have got games against Bolton and Leicester in the League Cup and the Premier League as well, which I'd also be surprised to see him featuring. So I think that September being ruled out is probably a fair assumption at this stage. Hopefully, he's back for the games in October, which does include, of course, matches against the likes of PSG in the Champions League as well at the Emirates. So we'll have more updates on that from, of course, tomorrow in Arteta's press conference, which you can follow live on the football.london website. My colleague Kai Karnak will be at the Shelbourne Realty Training Centre bringing you those updates. So hopefully we get some good news, but until then, it's still very much up in the air. The definite suspension of Declan Rice is another big absence for Arsenal. That's two of the three midfielders Arsenal have started with over the course of this season so far. And you could argue that had Mikel Merino, who is, of course, a new signing this summer, been fit, he would also be in the midfield at the moment. So Arsenal's entire middle three, Ali, are missing. That's a huge boost to Spurs.
On paper. On paper it is.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone connected with Tottenham, well, certainly the fan base, are ever kind of confident going into these games, regardless of what the injury news is, because anything can happen. I mean, even as we saw in the home game last season, Spurs kind of threw Arsenal a load of kind of gifts in that first half. It doesn't really even matter who's on the pitch sometimes. But yeah, I mean, of course, on paper, losing your two probably key midfielders in there is going to I don't want to use the word weaken, but obviously it's not your strongest teams. I guess it is technically weakening it. But it's strange seeing it from the Arsenal perspective, because normally in the past it's always been Harry Kane and an ankle injury going into the North London derby, and Willie won't he? Now to have Odegaard,
it was always Willie, because he will always play. So yeah.
Well, this is it. This is the fear, I think. Even with Odegaard, you kind of still in the back of your mind thinking, "Oh, is it all a ruse? An elaborate ruse? All the crutches and everything." But no, it's that midfield battle. I mean, what's likely to be your three, do you reckon, in the midfield on Sunday?
Well, it's interesting because one of the other contentious, kind of decisions that have got to be made is on Gabriel Jesus. And if Gabriel Jesus is back, which there is some whispers that he could be, I think that'll probably most certainly see Kai Havertz drop into the midfield. And then it'll be Jorginho and Partey. I think even if Odegaard had have been fit, Havertz still would have dropped in to replace Declan Rice. But I think Havertz will now play more of a second striker type role than the midfield role that he would have played if Odegaard was available. Some fans have wanted to see Ethan Nwaneri, our 17-year-old starlet, thrown in for a first start, but I think that would be a massive risk. I was speaking to Theo Walcott earlier in the week, actually, and he spoke about how he thought this was far too big of a game, to throw him into as well, and to throw him into the conductive role of Odegaard when, he can play in wide areas where you get a little bit more protection in debuts. But to do that role is an incredibly, real time-consuming job, I think, in terms of what the players have and the time they have on the ball. So, yeah, I think Jorginho, Partey, and Havertz is most likely to be that. But then somebody pointed out to me saying if either of Partey or Jorginho have an issue, Arsenal will have no one to come off the bench. Yeah. Miles Lewis-Skelly is the other youngster they've got who is exciting, has played in pre-season, mainly at left-back, but he is a midfielder. So he could be someone that comes in if there is another injury crisis. But otherwise, I think Arsenal and Arteta are going to have a hell of a job on their hands trying to work out what to do. So, yeah.
Who's the bigger miss, Odegaard or Rice?
I think Odegaard is the bigger miss because of just how he's obviously captain as well, which bleeds into it, and that off-field element, if you like, of his presence in there, his chance creation, the partnership with Bukayo Saka that he has. Arsenal's right-hand side has just been so consistent and so dangerous for so many seasons now, and those three of Saka, Odegaard, and White have barely ever been split up. So I think that is the bigger miss. I think Partey, when Partey is fit, which he seemingly is, and he hasn't been for many seasons. He's played 2 full 90s for Ghana over this international break as well. That will definitely help him. And Jorginho is, on the other hand, the complete opposite. He's not played a single minute of football competitively this season so far. So that dynamic between those two and how that's going to work. But I think that having Rice out, but having Partey and Jorginho to cover that is probably enough. Whereas creatively in midfield, Havertz isn't anywhere. He is creative, but he's not anywhere near as creative as what Odegaard is. So he's a big loss. I suppose on the Spurs side, and Arsenal fans in particular are going to be looking at Solanke, because for so many years Arsenal have been pained by Harry Kane's presence in these derbies. Last season without him, Arsenal still at the Emirates, suffered. And I think in the reverse fixture, of course, when after that taking that quite dominant lead, they still surrendered plenty of possession and surrendered chances. How do you feel Solanke, if indeed he is available, will influence this game?
To be honest, I mean, we've only seen him in one game against Leicester so far, and it wasn't really the best game to judge him on because he hadn't played in, I think it was 3 weeks before that. He hadn't really had a decent pre-season, so he looked like a player that was a little bit rusty.
Yeah.
But still, you could see elements of what he's going to bring to the Postecoglou system, which is a high-energy kind of pressing up front, which is massive for the system, which, to be fair, as amazing a player as Harry Kane is, and he would have scored goals galore in the system anyway, he was probably never going to bring that element to the Postecoglou system, the high energy pressing up the front. And whereas Solanke will bring that, and obviously he is a finisher, scored those 19 Premier League goals last season, did look rusty in that Leicester game. He had 2 or 3 chances that he didn't put away, but that's the thing about this system. It will create a lot of chances for him. So if he's anywhere near some kind of semblance of fitness, then the chances are going to fall to him in obviously a very big game. But yeah, he could make it all work. Son's role at the Emirates was quite an interesting one because he was the central striker on that day, yet I think he only had about 13, 14 touches of the ball and scored twice. It was just such a strangely really efficient performance. He didn't really do too much else. I know it sounds mad than score a couple of goals. So Solanke coming in would also free him up to go back to his favoured left wing spot, where he obviously has caused a lot of problems for a lot of teams, not just Arsenal over the years. So yeah, I'm fascinated by that, and I'm fascinated by the midfield. I mean, even that with Spurs, whereas Arsenal have got issues in who's available, Spurs have actually got so many available at the moment that I don't think he entirely knows what his best first choice three would be. I mean, last season it was Maddison, Basuma, and Sarr. Now you've got Bentancur, who I think we're going to speak about in a little bit as well. And Kulusevski's been excellent when playing in a deeper midfield role this season. You've got young Archie Gray that's come in, Lucas Bergwijn that's come in as well. There's actually a lot of options there as well. So I think he's got to get the blend right there. And it could be maybe all about the mobility of the Spurs midfield. If they can just kind of get around, like you say, with Jorginho especially not having played much football, that's maybe where the extra energy of the Spurs midfield and maybe a more settled nature to it would bring them benefits.
Yeah, I think the midfield battle is where North London derbies are ultimately won and lost. Like, I think about how Arsenal dominated the first half of last season's game in the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium so much with that midfield and the quick turnover of possession and how they broke on them. It was dominant, and so without Rice as well to balance up what Spurs might go with, that again is going to be big, and then not having the creative flair of Odegaard to be more, I suppose, clinical in the final passes is also going to be missing. So I think Havertz has got an argument of being the most important player in this game, in how he performs in midfield. And then, of course, from a Spurs side of things, it's going to be about the taking of those chances. I think for both sides, of course. We were talking off air before we came on about how both teams have created a lot, but finishing has not necessarily been there for either side. Just going back briefly to Solanke as well, I watched Solanke in pre-season for Bournemouth because Arsenal played against Bournemouth, and he had two huge chances and skied both of them. And maybe that rustiness at the beginning of the season will turn in this game, or maybe it will linger. We'll have to wait and see, of course. What won't linger, though, is the protection that NordVPN brings you. Is that right, Ali? Because it's not only lingering, it's going to be there for you always.
What a great segue that was. Obviously Spurs fans, we were well aware that I often always talk about the benefits of NordVPN, because it is something that I've used so much over the years. It's been very helpful both in a business sense with my work and having to cover Tottenham Hotspur, but also just in my social time and holidays and things like that, because NordVPN allows you to switch your device if you're abroad to thinking it's back in the UK, so you can watch all the shows that you would normally watch at home. You can take them abroad and kind of get around those pesky restrictions that normally stop you from doing that. And in a work sense, whenever I've been covering a European game and I can't get any replays of games, I've been able to watch things like Spurs play or any of the coverage back home by switching my phone or tablet or anything to thinking it's back in the UK. And it can also be helpful in the reverse of that scenario, where you might want to book a holiday or a flight or something from the destination country that you're going to, and Nord can switch your device to thinking it's abroad, and it can save you money in that respect as well. And on top of all of that, there's a security aspect of, if you're using potentially slightly dodgy public Wi-Fi, Nord can help lock down a lot of what's on your device and stop those nasty people taking things off of it. And on top of all of that, NordVPN is the fastest VPN in the world, and that means no buffering, no lagging, and you can stream your favorite shows from anywhere in the world without your bandwidth throttling. To get the best discount off your NordVPN plan, go to nordvpn.com/goldguest. Our link will also give you 4 extra months on the 2-year plan. There's no risk with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee, and the link is in the podcast episode description box.
We did talk about the midfield and alluded to the fact that Bentancur is in the news at the moment. Yeah. I'm just going to let you go for gold on this one, because it's quite an interesting story, to say the least.
Yes, so Rodrigo Bentancur, it's fair to say, hasn't had the best of summers, to put it mildly. Currently serving a 4-game ban at an international level for his part in the scenes after the Copa America semi-final between Uruguay and Colombia, when he... how do we put this? There were some scenes up in the crowd and some concerns among the Uruguay players that their families were involved. Unfortunately, video footage has shown that Bentancur's answer to this was throwing bottles into the crowd. Not entirely sure, of course, who that was going to ever help, but that's what he did, and he got a 4-match ban for that, and he was handed a $16,000 or £12,000 fine for that. So that's one separate incident that was been and dealt with. Now, before the Copa America, there was an interview that he did that was broadcast on, I think it was Uruguayan television, but it obviously, with the world as it is now, has made its way across, very quickly made its way across social media. Just going to read the exact words that we used. Then there's no kind of interpretation on this. He making a joke with a reporter who asked for a shirt from one of his teammates. The journalist asked, "Can you get me the shirt from the Korean?" To which Bentancur asked, "Sonny?" And the journalist said, "Or any other champion." To which Bentancur replied, "Or any cousin of Sonny. They all look more or less the same." To which the reporter replied, "Yes, of course." So that's the exact transcript from what was said in the video. That subsequently, of course, created a lot of controversy. Lots of people, not only within the Korean community, but outside it as well, very upset about it. And FA began investigating. As we know, both of us covering anything that the FA does, there's often a very long period, especially with things that like this include potential racist slurs and things like that. It can take a long time to get sorted and looked into. And eventually today, they have come back with a charge. To say it specifically, their statement says Rodrigo Bentancur has been charged with an alleged breach of FA Rule E3 for misconduct in relation to a media interview. It's alleged that the Tottenham Hotspur midfielder has breached FA Rule E3.1 as he acted in an improper manner and or used abusive and or insulting words and or brought the game into disrepute. It is further alleged that this constitutes an aggravated breach, which is defined in FA Rule E3.2, as it include a reference which express or implied to nationality and or race and or ethnic origin. Rodrigo Bentancur has until Thursday, 19th of September 2024 to provide a response to this charge. So first thing from the end of that, he's available in the meantime. So he's available for the North London Derby if required. He's available certainly up until the 19th. And then we'll see kind of where it goes from there. I did a little bit of further digging, spoke to people within the FA, and for these kind of this kind of potential punishment, if it were to be upheld, because of the aggravated breach nature of it, he could potentially get a match ban of 6 to 12 games, which is a hefty sum. But yeah, that's all to be decided, and obviously whether he accepts or denies the charge. If he accepts, it goes, the commission will go straight away and decide on the sanction or sanctions. If he denies it, the commission will then have to decide whether to uphold or dismiss the charge, and then if they uphold it, then it's about the sanction or sanction. So yeah, not the greatest summer for Rodrigo Bentancur, and on top of that, he also had a nasty looking head injury in the Leicester game when he got concussion. So yeah, it's probably been 3 or 4 months that he would probably like to wipe out from existence if possible, because it's not been the best few months for him. And yeah, we find out what happens with Rodrigo Bentancur, and purely on a playing kind of look at it all, in the Leicester game, he'd actually been quite bright, and he looked like a little bit more like Rodrigo Bentancur before the cruciate ligament injury he had a couple of years ago at Leicester. So yeah, it's been a stinker, let's be honest, of a summer for him, and we'll find out what this brings.
Yeah, obviously it's a very serious allegation, and any updates on this story, of course, will bring you across the football.london website. I'm sure Ali will, of course, be tweeting it as well and keeping you informed on it. So a lengthy man, it brings back obviously memories of other players that have had these. We think about the Luis Suarez, Patrice Evra instance back in the day as well. It's been a long time since I think really these types of stories have, which I suppose is a good thing. It shows the progression, of course, in the game and the continual fight against discrimination. But it's a shame. I suppose a recent example that fans will see stuck in their minds is, of course, Enzo Fernandez this summer as well, after the Copa America and the chanting that went on inside the celebrations of the Argentina bus, and discussions and debates amongst supporters about how Chelsea also handled that. How do you feel as though Ange Postecoglou will deal with this situation?
It's an interesting one because I asked him about it just before Spurs went off on their tour of Korea, where interestingly, I thought he was going to get absolutely kind of bombarded by questions about it over there, and nobody asked. Even
Right.
though it was a big thing, it was across all of their news, and
Mm.
the fans on social media had very, very strong views on it. Maybe, I don't know, maybe the answer that he gave me was enough for them. But the only thing I would say that he said that everything Spurs did would be led by Son's reaction to it,
Right.
which I get it. I understand where he's come from when he said that. Also, I do feel that's kind of putting a lot of it on one man, as it were.
Yeah.
I wasn't a massive fan of that approach, and I wondered whether that might have changed had he been asked about it in Korea. Because this is the issue with it: is that some people are saying that Bentancur apologised afterwards twice. We can analyse exactly what he said and whether it was a full and complete and understanding apology. That's one thing, but he did apologise twice, and then Son accepted that apology publicly in a post as well. So there's some people that will kind of say that, well, that's that then. It's between two people and it's dealt with, but it's not. It's not because of how he said and what he said. That has affected, of course, a far more people than just Son. And
Mm.
that's, I think, is why we're at this stage we're at now. And Kick It Out were involved as well. They got a lot of complaints about it. So yeah, it's Spurs and Postecoglou, I feel, have kind of been. They're in a situation where they're being led by other forces, whether it's Son or when kind of speaking to people around the club. I think they're also awaiting the FA's verdict or the commission's verdict on it as well before then they make their own independent behind the scenes decision on what happens. I mean, presumably you couldn't ban him because that's already happening. It would just probably be a financial thing behind the scenes, you'd think. Yeah, so it's one of those we're kind of going to have to see. Obviously, Postecoglou is going to have to speak about it again tomorrow at his press conference. It's going to be brought up. I'm intrigued to see whether his answer is different to the one he gave me in the summer and whether it is more of a wide-ranging answer rather than just focused on Sonny one. We'll find out.
Mm.
But it's just not what you want to deal with as a club. That they spoke in their statement at the time about education and things like that, and improving the understanding of the words people use and things like that. And yeah, it's been a fascinating exercise, I think, as always in these situations of seeing different people's reactions to it. The one that always kind of I always find amazing is people that aren't technically affected by it telling others how they should be affected by it. It's always a very strange way
Always
that
the way.
social media takes
Yeah.
us. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's mad. So yeah, we'll find out both the final ruling and we'll find out tomorrow in a more short-term nature which way Postecoglou's kind of discussing it, which will be interesting.
It will be interesting, and as mentioned before, that will be available on the football.london website with all of the updates from the training centre. Is it the training centre? I'm such in an Arsenal frame of mind.
I know we were
Indeed.
talking about that before, weren't we? We've been so focused on our clubs.
Yeah.
It's like it was just zeroed in. Both, you've had obviously Arteta news today to deal with, and I've had Bentancur stuff, and yeah, even kind of thinking there's this huge game at the weekend has been like, oh yeah, that, yeah.
Yeah, just before we do, we're coming into the final stage of that. You've brought it up there, and that was kind of the last thing I wanted to talk about was the news that Mikel Arteta has agreed a new 3-year contract at Arsenal. There's been an interestingly kind of split social response to this. From a personal perspective, I've taken myself away from Twitter a little bit recently because it's just continually just barreling towards being a more horrible and horrible place is social media. But it is interesting to see kind of a split on the Arsenal side of things, which is one. I think the larger majority of people are very pleased. Obviously, he's taken Arsenal into a position where they haven't really been in the last, on nearly 20 years since they last won a title in 2004, where they are an established title challenger alongside Manchester City and to an extent last season, especially Liverpool. And there is obviously the other side, which is he's not won a trophy since 2020, which is when he picked up the FA Cup. Has he done enough to earn this? Should they have announced this now? Should they have waited until the end of the season to see what he would have won or if he will win anything? And then I think there's people in between who are like, I think obviously he needs to achieve something in these next 3 years to justify why they've given him this new deal. And if he doesn't, it could be seen as something that maybe Arsenal need to go to somebody else to take them that one step further to land them those titles that they so desperately want. From a Tottenham perspective, do you see it from the outsider going, I'd really rather Mikel Arteta wasn't Arsenal manager because he's done really, really well with them? Or is it he's not really won anything with them for the last 4 years? So that trend may continue.
Yeah, it's a fascinating one. I can see both sides. I can understand when you, and this is always the case in football, when you reach a higher level, the expectations go up. They go through the roof, and the standards that are placed on you suddenly become so much more. And personally, I think Arteta's done a terrific job. You know, he's kind of taken the club in the right direction. You can see they're a constant force now, which, let's be honest, I know obviously there was a long time when Spurs were finishing below Arsenal, but then became this period of time where Spurs were finishing above Arsenal. And he has reversed that. And now it's even not so much about that, it's more about the title challenges. And that kind of shows the job he's done. However, and we've kind of always spoken about this in the office and whenever we've all chatted about Spurs and Arsenal, and I sometimes, you know, I speak about other reporters with this, and I'll put the question to you: if Arsenal don't win the title this season, having been in a position over the last 2 years, is that a failure? When you've got someone like Man City, you know, who are just this huge immovable force almost.
Yeah, and this question obviously does come up a lot. And the way I usually tackle it, as I say, is to people like, who is your favourite for the title going in? And I think 99% of people will say after they've won, 6 of the last 7, it has to be Manchester City. So if your expectation is that to avoid being sacked effectively, which I think if you're saying a season is a failure, that usually does correspond to a sacking or a change or a major overhaul at some perspective, and it usually does land on the manager. You're saying that to avoid that, Arteta has to overachieve our expectations to avoid a season being called a failure, which is a really strange, scenario. But that said, there is an argument that Arsenal need a manager that can overachieve to be able to land them that title and to beat Manchester City to the title. And of course, Liverpool still very much in the fold and have changed their coach from a very well-established manager that got them the trophies, got them the league title that they were so craving, and is already starting the season, very, very well. I know it's only a small sample size we have, and there'll be much tougher tests for Arne Slot to come. But the early signs look like he's had an immediate impact, that he's changed the philosophy somewhat to be a little bit more secure than Klopp style was, even though it's maybe not as offensively impressive. But it's just such a wild one, because the managerial market in itself is also not great. Like, there aren't particularly any obvious candidates who you'd go for. Your Ancelotti's are at Real Madrid. Are they going to move? Probably not. Klopp's now retired. Guardiola will leave City, won't manage another English team, I imagine. And you're starting to look around and thinking, no one really knew who Arne Slot was, to be honest. If we're being very honest, the majority didn't. Those that followed, Dutch football will haven't been impressed by his work at Feyenoord. But would anyone have thought that he was the right man really to take over from Jurgen Klopp's tenure? It's incredibly tough. So I think what Arteta has done and what he continues to do is take Arsenal forwards. Every single season, they're scoring more goals, they're getting more points, they're getting closer. So while you're doing that, it's very tough to justify changing things when you're moving forwards. If Arsenal go backwards this season or next season after signing this new deal, that's when I think people that are perhaps more critical of him will have a much stronger argument.
Yeah, and interesting. A lot of Spurs fans, or certainly a section of them, with Postecoglou, are kind of pointing to Arteta's building blocks in the early seasons, and that's kind of, Spurs were in a right sorry state when Postecoglou came into the club, and he's had to overhaul the entire place, really, not only kind of on the pitch and with the squad, which is huge. I mean, the difference to just 12 months ago, the players that he's got available is just remarkable. But also off the pitch, he kind of demanded a lot of changes that have now come into place. And kind of, you get the sense that's what Arteta did behind the scenes as well. Very made it Arteta's Arsenal rather than kind of what it was before. And a lot of Spurs fans are pointed towards the fact that they finished 5th and they dropped off towards the end of last season through a combination of factors, injuries and various things, and the sense that Spurs just don't give any manager time to push through that initial rebuilding process. I mean, we can give you the ridiculous stat that Postecoglou was the first manager in half a decade to complete a full season. He was the first manager to have a second summer at the club, which is it's in half a decade, which is just insane. And it just shows, no kind of joined up thinking, no thought that, actually, maybe it takes a little bit of time to tidy up a complete mess. And that's kind of what he's been doing. So yeah, I do think people point to Arteta down the road and see kind of what he's built on the platform he's now given the club to kind of push on. But yeah, like I said at the top, really, it's the big clubs, the big title-winning clubs, I suppose. Exactly that scenario, like you say, they get to a stage where if they're not winning titles, the manager gets sacked, which is just insane when you think about kind of where Spurs and Arsenal have both come from. That anyone can get to that stage, but you know, all part of the game nowadays. There's even less patience nowadays than there ever was.
It's a cutthroat business. It's football, and it's going to be, I think, the decisiveness on Sundays is who of the two teams will be the most cutthroat, who wins it. I will push you for a prediction because I'm mean. So tell me what you're going to go for.
I'm dreadful on this. Whatever I predict, especially in the North London derby, never comes to pass. I'm going to go for Spurs. Kind of getting. You remember there was that kind of pattern, wasn't there, where both teams would probably win at home. I think it'll start to go back to that maybe this season. Maybe Spurs get a 2-1 win.
And I would have gone 2-1 Arsenal. So I think that probably tells you where our heads at is that the expectation that defensively there are cracks that can be exploited, and that if teams can take the chances, they'll win it, which seems like a very Michael Owen-esque prediction. The team that takes the chance will score the goal. But that is the reality, I think, of these games. And it's who keeps their cool, who can finish their breakfast. And I look forward to it. It's going to be an exciting one. And Ali, I'm sure you're going to enjoy being there.
Well, I don't know. I never enjoy these games.
No, neither do I, to be fair.
I just don't know.
Hate the build-up, hate the game itself. I'm just happy when it's over. To be honest, I'm happy when it's over, no matter the results sometimes. Just the build-up and the actual game in itself is not nice. Just all of the ramifications that you've got swirling around in your mind of your friends that are going to say things, the writing and coverage we have to do post-match, no matter the result. Yeah, it's tough.
Absolutely. Bring on the final whistle, I say.
Indeed. Of course, if you want to get and bring a final whistle to poor internet protection, you can bring to yourself what you need in NordVPN. And to get the best discount off your NordVPN plan, please go to nordvpn.com/goalguest. Our link will also give you 4 months extra on a 2-year plan, as Ali pointed out earlier. There's no risk with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. Who can say any fairer than that? And the link is, as always, in the podcast description box. Thank you for those that have been listening across both of the Gold and Guest Talk Tottenham podcast and the Arsenal Way. Guesty will be back as usual. You won't have to listen to my dulcet tones for much longer. And Kaya will be back, of course, next week for our breakdowns on our respective shows of the derby. Ali, it's been an absolute pleasure to chat with you, my friend.
Same with you, my friend.
Lovely stuff. And we won't wish each other the best because we know that we won't mean it if we do. So we will just see you again on our next respective shows. Have a fantastic weekend up to that point and enjoy the game. See you soon.